Hi everyone, this is Carissa and we are back to talk about the bind off row on my FringeShip shawl. Now this is not your average bind off row because we have these steek panels between the two pairs of stitch markers that are going to be cut open and unraveled to become the fringe. We don't actually need to worry about binding those stitches off. We do, however, need to be concerned with the remaining shawl stitches. We have a few at each end here and a few in the center that we need to ensure are properly bound off and secured independent of the steek stitches, so that when we cut and unravel those steek stitches, there's no risk that the actual shawl stitches will unravel as well. And before we start this row, I want to point out that I have cut my tail of yarn, leaving it about 24 inches or 60 centimeters long. This is because we are going to be drawing that tail through some stitches as we work this last row, and therefore it can't be attached to the ball anymore. So let's get started. We are on our last wrong side row, and we are going to start. We have 4 stitches before this first stitch marker. So I am going to knit 2 together twice. So I'm going to knit the first 2 stitches together, and then knit the second 2 stitches, or rather the third and fourth stitches together as well. So now I have 2 stitches on my right hand needle. I'm going to use my left hand needle to pass the first stitch up and over the second to bind off. And now this stitch here, I want to pull my tail through it. So I find the easiest way to do that is to pop that stitch back on the left hand needle, knit it again, and then just use my right hand needle to pull that tail all the way through. Now I can drop that stitch off the left hand needle and pull tight on the tail, and that makes those 4 stitches from the shawl before this steek stitch marker, that makes those securely bound off. Now I can remove that first stitch marker, and we will work across our steek stitches, knitting most of them and purling the center stitch. Since I have 7 stitches in my steek panel, that means I'm going to knit 3, purl 1, knit 3. Now I can remove the second steek stitch marker. So now we are to the center 3 stitches before this next marker, center 3 stitches of our shawl, and we need to securely bind those off as well. So I am going to work a double decrease, a centered double decrease. I am going to slip the next 2 stitches as if I were going to work a knit 2 together. So I will insert my needle into both stitches as if to knit 2 together, but I'm just going to slip those off the left needle instead. Then I will knit the 3rd stitch, and I will use my left hand needle to grab those 2 slipped stitches and pull them up and over the 3rd stitch and off my right hand needle. And again, I want to pull the tail through this last remaining stitch, so I will put it back on the left needle, knit it, and pull that tail all the way through. Well, that didn't work. Let's try that again. Knit it and pull that tail all the way through. And then we can drop it off the left hand needle and pull tight to secure those center 3 stitches of our shawl. Remove the next steek stitch marker, and we'll work across our second steek panel as before. I'm going to knit to the center stitch of my steek panel, purl the center stitch, and then knit to the end of my steek panel and remove that last stitch marker. Now we are down to the final 3 stitches of our shawl, and I am simply going to knit all 3 of them together into one. Knit 3 together. And again, we want to pass the tail through that last stitch. Well, it looks like I've split some plies. Let me undo that and fix it. Okay. So I'm going to knit 3 together without splitting the plies this time. And again, I want to pull the tail through that last stitch, so I will put it back on my left-hand needle, knit it, and pull that tail all the way through and out. Drop the stitch off my left-hand needle and pull it tight. Now all I am left with are the 2 sections of steek stitches. I have bound off the first shawl stitches at the end here, the 3 shawl stitches that were in the center, and the 3 that were at the end as well. So now, since these steek stitches are going to be cut open and unraveled anyway, I don't need to worry about them unraveling now, so I can simply slide my needle out and we are done with that row. So here we have our little envelope shape. You can see I can stick my fingers in there. It looks basically the same on the front and back. And now what we're going to do, this is actually going to flip the other direction, and we are going to cut open the steeks right along those center columns of stockinette stitch, and we are going to unravel the garter stitches on either side, and then our little envelope shape is going to open up into a triangular shawl. So I'm going to grab my scissors, a nice sharp pair of scissors, and I am going to find the hole where we cast on these steek stitches in the first place, and I'm going to insert my scissors into that hole and carefully cut. And I have the scissors on top of my finger here so that I don't accidentally cut the shawl fabric underneath. So I am holding the scissors on top of my finger, but carefully so as not to cut myself, of course. And I am going to carefully cut up the center of that knit stitch column. Cut. All the way up to the bind off row. So now we have that envelope shape, and we have cut open one of the steeks, so this arm of the shawl can unfold. Let's cut open the second steek over here in the same way. Find the hole where I cast on my steek stitches and carefully cut up the center of that stockinette stitch column all the way up to the bind off row. So we have, I'm going to cut this a little shorter as well just to get it out of the way, but I'm going to leave plenty of length to incorporate this into the fringe. Get that extra tail out of the way. So we have our little envelope shape, and now that we have cut our steeks open, we can open up the arms and pull down the bottom of the triangle as well. And this will, I know it looks a little weird, the slip stitches pull in the garter stitch, but I promise you it will block out to a nice triangular shape. So now we are going to start unraveling the steek stitches, and we will tie our fringe off nice and neat. So I'm going to start at the bind off edge, and I'm going to simply start unraveling those steek stitches. And I may not unravel them all at once. So I've got a few rows unraveled now. And now we can make a decision about our fringe. How big of a bundle do we want for our fringe? I like to do somewhere between 2 and maybe 4 or 5 pieces of fringe, little strands of yarn. So I'm going to take, let's say, the top 3. I'm going to take those top 3 strands from my unraveled steek panel, and I'm going to simply tie them in an overhand knot. And since I only cast on 7 stitches, these are kind of short, so it can be a little bit more difficult to get that knot tied. And then I'm going to make sure that my loose knot there, I'm going to hold on to it as I pull on the tails to make sure that the knot gets slid up all the way close to the fabric. Pull on each of those pieces of fringe to make sure that my knot is nice and tight. So there's my first little tassel of fringe, and I will snip those ends later on to make sure that it's all nice and even. So now we've got the rest of our unraveled bits. I'll take the next 3 of those strands and I'll do the same. I'll tie them in an overhand knot. Sometimes it helps to twist them together a bit first. Tie them into a knot. And as I pull that tight, I'm going to hold on to that knot and make sure that it stays nice and snug against the shawl fabric. There's our second fringe. So I'm going to keep unraveling fringe and tying it, and I will come back and show you what I do when I get to this gap here in the middle at our separation point. Okay, I have tied my fringe down this first quarter of the shawl, and I have gotten to the gap here where my line of increases was. And I am left with 2 strands of yarn after my last fringe tassel that I tied. And that's good. Since I am tying in bundles of 3, I want to grab some from each side of the gap and tie them together, and that's going to close that gap a little bit better. So it worked out well that I had 2 at the end here. Then I will take the last 1 on this side of the gap and I'll tie those together in a little bundle of 3. Now, if I had ended this little section with 3 strands, I could have tied those together into a bundle and then worked my way this direction and tied the last 3 into a bundle here. But instead, to close that gap, what I would probably do instead is take those 3, take one of them from those 3 and swap it out with one of them from this edge. So crisscrossing 2 strands before I tied them into separate bundles on either side of the gap. And crisscrossing them like that will help close that gap as well. But since I ended up with only 2, I'm just going to take the 1 from this side of the gap and tie them together, and that will close my gap nicely. Now, I can't do that yet because this was the cast on edge from our steek panel, so it doesn't want to unravel from this end. I need to go down here to the point of the triangle where we bound off and work my way down back to the purple, to the cast on edge there. So I'm going to pause with these 2 strands here untied for right now. I'm going to come to the point of my triangle and I'm going to start unraveling this side. And again, if I want to take and close this gap here, this is the bind off tail from those center shawl stitches here in the middle. Then I'll take 1 strand from this side and I will unravel 1 strand from this side as well. And those are the 3 that I will tie in a bundle for the center of my shawl. And that'll help close that little gap there too. And then I'll continue unraveling down this direction. And once I get to this end, then I'll take the last strand and tie it together with these 2 strands to close that gap. So let me work on tying the fringe this direction, and I'll meet you back at this gap and we'll see how we close that up. Okay, I have finished tying my fringe from the bottom point of my shawl up to this middle gap again, and I was left with 2 strands on this side of the gap as well. So I've got, if I can find them all, so I've got 2 purple strands from this side and 2 purple strands from this side. I'm tying my fringe in bundles of 3, but that's okay. I can have 1 little bundle of 4, just depending on how big you decide to tie your bundles. You may end up with not the right multiple of strands, and that is totally fine. Just go up a strand or down a strand for that last bit of fringe and no one's going to notice. So there's my last 2 tied ones on either side. I'm going to take all 4 of these strands, 2 from either side of the gap, and tie them together into my last little fringe. Then I will go over here and I'm going to do the same thing on this side of the shawl, and I'll see you whenever the fringe is tied. And with that, all of my fringe is tied. The only end I have to weave in is my very beginning cast on tail up here. I'm going to take this and block it and make sure that everything is nice and straight and triangular. Once it is dry, I will go back and trim the fringe nice and neat. And there we have it. I hope these tutorial videos have helped you work your way through the pattern, and I hope that you love your FringeShip shawl.